Alright, hi everyone, Surrender here, and welcome to my very first brutal critique video. As you can see, it's a ridiculous length, and I can tell you that this has taken a very long time to put together and edit. A lot of the things, jokes especially, took a lot more effort than you can actually imagine, and a lot of them are not worth the amount of effort I put in, especially except for the Gaul one in the beginning. I think that is one of the best things I've done so far. I want to actually create this channel with the idea of going forward of making these types of really long videos which are going to break down games and films that have maybe flaws or some things that are maybe extremely good but I personally have issue with. I really like the idea of these types of videos, but with my illnesses it takes me a long time to do so. So I do hope that you can appreciate the amount of editing and the amount of voice work and effort that has gone into this and give it some form of share or like. It would be madly appreciated. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. This is going to be a breakdown of Destiny 2. To reiterate what I was saying before, you've probably noticed the character sheets on screen. Team 4-Star do something similar to this, and the YouTuber Joker, who I will link in the description for literally the exact same idea. This is who I'm taking credit for, and I hope people don't criticize me too hard, but I do think that a video of this length needs also the equivalent amount of editing and effort put in on that side, which is going to take a lot of time. And so I hope people don't criticize me too much and think I'm copying. I'm going to try to put my own spin on it, but that might not work, and if it doesn't work, it's just going to be the character sheets. I really hope you understand, and as I said, the link in the description to his channel. Absolutely brilliant YouTuber, and has said a lot of good things about Destiny 2. Not good things, but yeah. As I was saying in the introduction, this is probably going to be an extremely long video, and I don't know how long at this point. I was even going to go as far as buying the game on PC, considering it's on 50% sale at the minute, but I actually don't have that much hatred towards my money, and I feel like I couldn't afford the game even if I wanted to. This kind of video as well, I don't think is going to get watched that much, so for the amount of effort and money that would have been going into it, we'll probably not see any returns in viewership, subscribers, and will probably be ignored by most people, but I feel like I really want to get something substantial out there, not only with my points, but with a little bit of more objective views on the inside of how maybe a game developer might think in some way. If you don't know, I wanted to be a 3D artist in the games industry. Unfortunately, I fell very ill, and after my university ended, I ended up not being able to really do anything. Now, it's opened up opportunities like this for me to sit down and actually analyze these types of things and put some really big amounts of effort into my own videos. Not only do I want to talk about the tools that were used and why the fact that people have come out and said the tools they use are very difficult, and why to me that seems like a fundamental flaw in Bungie as a company, I also want to alliterate that I do understand the game went through a massive remaking, basically, and it got completely put in a separate direction away from Destiny 1's development path by Luke Smith, which I think is probably one of the first points that this game really did go downhill, because Destiny 1 was, in its own right, a very trial and error thing of a new franchise, and it did find its core design and a very core way of making the game playable, along with giving players a thing to thrive for and play for, and developers time to develop. The Taken King style of design, I think, is what the game should have stayed as. They did complain, saying that the tools are too hard to carry on making content like that, but for some reason they basically come out and done the exact same thing with the Curse of Osiris and the Warmind DLC, so I'm not sure really what is happening on the PR side of that, but as I said, that's more for later. Now, before all that, we do have to go back to a time of fun and love. And no, I'm not talking about Halo 3. I'm in fact talking about Destiny 1. I loved this game, with all of its flaws, I really did. Vanilla Destiny, while was a flawed game, had its reasons to be flawed. It was a new IP, everything was being created from scratch, and in general there was, like with Destiny 2, issues with rebooting the franchise a little bit during development. And with Destiny 1, that's a lot bigger of an issue because everything is being made from scratch. But I also want to explain that I am a huge sci-fi nerd. I am fucking so into sci-fi. I'm even writing a science fiction horror at the minute because it is a franchise I absolutely adore. A lot of people online for many, many years, and even some people in my day-to-day life, know me as Serenity. It's a name that I adopted for myself because my gamertag had always had the name Serenity in it, so people call me that. Or the butchered versions, Security, Senjora, Syllabus was one. That was a perfect one. I remember that one very clearly. There was so many, and Sentry. People have always butchered my name on things like Call of Duty, not the smartest people on there. But when I say this is coming from a fan, it is coming from someone who very openly was called Serenity after their favourite ship from their favourite TV show, Firefly. The show that got cancelled way before its time. Fucking F, pay respects. But they never took the sky from me. Moving on. Alright, so now that I have established that I have somewhere deep between my blocked arteries and my fat-covered breast a heart that loves sci-fi, I'm also someone who is deeply critical of things. So the first warning signs for me that Destiny was kind of going off the beaten path was somewhere later in the PvE changes in that side of the game in Destiny 1. A lot of people will remember the Omnigul strike very fondly. And I bring that strike up because of the grind for the Grasp of Malak. A lot of people will remember being with a hunter who tethered. You would either get Dark Drinkers or Galleys, and you'd spin to win and grind for that God Roll Grasp of Malak. Now, this wasn't a huge issue in terms of, like, destroying the economy of pulse rifles. Banshee 44 wasn't licking fucking moisture off the top of tuna can lids to survive. And by no means was anyone saying, fuck raiding, let's just go farm Omnigul for the whole day, like we have today with public events, and things that would change the game's fundamental design to avoid rewarding players in doing activities such as the raid. The Grasp of Malak was an amazing gun and still is my go-to primary weapon in Destiny 1, but I would still not stop doing the raid to get this gun over and over and over and to farm Omnigul over and over and over. It wasn't exactly a hard gun to get. With the implementation of skeleton keys, I can understand why they removed it and put all of the endgame loot from strikes, or strike-specific loot, in its own chest. But they changed this and made Omnigul as a fight, giving her invincibility phases, and making the entire fight much, much longer, meaning people who knew the strike, people who had mastered the strike, were no longer rewarded by knowing how the strike worked. Not only that, the players who were powerful enough to kill her quickly were not rewarded for their power. Now, what I mean by rewarded for their power is no matter what you did in that fight, after the update, which really came in as only to stop people grinding her for loot, no matter how many gods you slayed, no matter how many universe-altering, space-time continuum-shattering robots you stopped, no matter how many space Nazis on the moon you slayed, that fight, from beginning to end, will always be exactly the same. No matter what, it will be the same from the day you first did it to the very last time you ran the strike. Now that is a problem with in-game flow, and this is a very important thing you have to remember. In-game flow, a lot of the time, happens naturally, and it's not something that goes with a curveball and just comes out of nowhere. A lot of the time, it will be hours of trial and tribulation and players perfecting ways of running things that they can then spread out via platforms like YouTube and Twitch, and everyone can learn the perfect way to run these things. Now, game flow also has the curveball effect, Now, what is the curveball effect for? It's for things like challenges. That is exactly what they introduced. They learnt this lesson. Players got too familiar. Me, I was always the sword bearer. In my team, I was always the sword bearer. No one else liked doing it. I knew how to 4-hit Crota. Everyone would let me sword bear. So what did they do? Did they give up and say, let's patch it so one person can't hold the sword more than once? No. What they did is they said, fucking batter up. We are going to make it so if you hold the sword more than once, you won't get as much loot. They attacked us where it hurts. They attacked us where it means something. Doing challenges to get more rewards is exactly how you handle the situation. Not making the exact same thing mildly more tedious, because that completely destroys game flow. There are some really good examples of this in Destiny 1, and it was a change that came with the Omnigul stuff, and that is with Crota's End. Crota's End was a fun raid. The fundamentals for a good raid, loot-wise, the loot looked awesome. It felt awesome. The boss fight was wicked. Everything about that raid was fucking killer, and all the secrets and everything. It was just bloody fucking awesome. But it was broken as shit. So what do? Do they completely make it so it's boring and shit? No, they add a bit of a puzzle, and they make it so that you are actually having to earn the loot that you're going to be getting from this place. But they also make it really fun. Rather than it just being fly over the chasm, wait for the ogres to spawn and kill them, it's get everyone over, and then you're like, is that it? No, 17 swords spawn, and you have to take up arms against all the fucking hell beasts that spawn. Like, fuck yes, that bit was awesome. And that is how you properly update something. If you're going to implement something, make sure it's not mediocre, make sure it doesn't completely distract from what the original intent was, and if you're going to do anything, make it with fucking swords that shoot fucking fire lightning like those things do when you slam them, because nothing's fucking cooler than that. The challenge books were something that apparently were meant to be in Destiny 2, and I personally think they were some of the best time I ever had with Destiny. Unfortunately, the warning signs in the end of Destiny 1 were there, that Destiny 2 might be heading into a wall with no breaks, and that seems to be what actually happened. Now, the challenges that were actually implemented into the raid in Destiny 2 are really not that interesting, but mainly because the raid itself isn't interesting. The thing that made the challenges so amazing and interesting to old players and made everyone come back and play in Destiny 1 is because the raids themselves fundamentally were good raids. This is an issue I don't think Bungie or Luke Smith or whoever quite understands. What made those raid challenges fun to do weren't the challenges as much as it was the raid itself being altered in such a way that differentiated itself from the original design. It was something that was there to put a curveball into what everyone's standard for the raid was. But the raid itself, as its own entity, could still be played and enjoyed without the need for these challenges. I feel like the raid in Destiny 2 has the issue that even with the challenges, it feels like a rinse-repeat boring process. The wall that I actually think Destiny did hit is changing the design from the Taken King style of design. I really believe that Year 3 Destiny is where we should have left off from. The foundations were there, the future did seem really, really bright, but really that's the problem. The future seemed too good to be true, and I feel they tried to overhype themselves or overwork themselves in such a way that it collapsed under its own weight. Then someone came in to mop up, and unfortunately the way they tried to sort it out was by making things linear and then not having the time to actually pack it full of content. Now, what I mean by this is I didn't expect Destiny 2 to ship with 3 raids, 4 challenge books, and for it to give me a blowjob when it arrived. No. What I mean is I expected Destiny 2 as a foundation to feel solid enough to hold the same level of content. But I think that Bungie blew their load and thought people aren't going to accept anything more or anything less than what they had in Year 3 Destiny 1. So by making things linear, they got to a point where they could fast track and push out a lot of content quickly, but unfortunately deadlines met, and so they had to ship the game before all of that content could be implemented. One of the kinds of bits of proof, I think, that exists to back this type of theory is the fact that scannables are all around the vanilla game, but are nowhere to be seen in things like the Curse of Osiris. Something that's very, very big that seems completely overlooked. Now, that would really key to me that there was some form of divide on whether it should be in the game or still be Grimoire cards, and that linear focus of putting them in the game completely went over people's heads, and they thought we have to rush out more content, and that is where the Curse of Osiris came from. But that is all wild accusations, which I'm trying to avoid. And to understand things and what went wrong, I'm not necessarily stating facts, I'm stating what I think and what I viewed from what has been said by developers and just own opinion of what I've seen of the games industry. A lot of people seem to look at Destiny 1 and discredit what people like me say by saying, Destiny 1 Year 1 was bad and got better in time. Now, I shouldn't have to explain how stupid that argument is. Not only was Destiny 1 built up from scratch, there was a lot of showing that they were learning. And if you don't believe that, go back and look at videos from Vanilla Destiny, then look at the Taken King. It is fucking night and day. You can really see that all of the input that was coming to and from the community was being used in some way to drive the live team. Which is why it was so surprising to see Destiny 2 make so many of the same mistakes, even though so many assets, so many animations, so many models, so many everything, the lore was already put in place, ready to go, drag and drop. Now, it isn't that simple when it comes to a games engine, but as they have said, making content is hard. I will put a clip in here if I can find it.
And Zen. And then after Taking King, what they did was, and I reported this on Kotaku, what Bungie decided was we can't do this anymore. This is just too much. This is too hard for us to do. The tools that we work with are really hard to deal with. It's hard for us to make this much content. It's just hard making content in general. And they said, we are going to do a drip feed of smaller stuff, and we're going to put up the Eververse, sell microtransactions, and make money that way. And Activision said, okay. It was part of their renegotiated deal. And they got to a point where they didn't have to be cranking out as much content. And now they're back to the same pattern where they have to crank out these DLCs and just be making content constantly.
Which is something I'm going to touch on later, so if that clip is around, then hurrah, it's in there. If it's not, then that was a weird, awkward silence. But I personally feel that if someone had come to me and said they want to do a reboot of the game really, really late into development as just a normal person and as, well, just as a gamer, a general standpoint, that is completely fucking illogical from a company directive and a game point. Just, there are so many reasons why rebooting that late into a process is a bad idea. Honestly, there could be a fucking alien from the furthest stars with no idea of human society who can only communicate by farting gas through the corpse of your loved ones, and he'd go... Honestly, it is probably one of the worst things I have ever heard a game company do, considering their first game did almost something identical. Now, while I am looking at Destiny as a sequel, I am trying to award it for its own merits, which is why we're going to start delving into the actual story for a little bit, and I'm going to do a step-by-step of the first few introductory bits, and then I'm going to actually start taking bigger leaps and start explaining how some designs really are just uncomparable and just ungodly stupid in comparison to Destiny 1's and other games. We start the game with an explanation of the human race being visited by the Traveller, and, in my opinion, one of the most laughable lines in all of the game is here.
And for centuries, humanity thrived. Until it didn't.
I understand where they were coming from with this line, but it really just sounded stupid. Now, we see a silhouette of the Traveller's ancient enemy, which appears to be a triangle. So, assuming this isn't some child with an enormous wooden toy trying to shove the wrong block into the wrong hole, then we can assume that this is an enemy that we haven't encountered in Destiny 1, and we may not even encounter in this campaign. So, to new players and to old players, it's already establishing all of the kind of main story that needs to be known or not known in some aspects to help with later reveals and to kind of make it so that the PC audience who are new to the game or anyone who's picking up Destiny don't feel like they're completely out of the loop. But taking that with a pinch of salt, even trying to view it as a new player, it really does feel like a lot of information is completely missed here. Now, normally, where would I go to find out things about this great collapse? A Cortex, which is why it does feel very strange that something like this wasn't actually implemented into the game, rather with the scannables. I can't see how it would have been so difficult, so when you scan an item, it just adds that audio log to some form of system in your menus. Now, I think this is one of the biggest things for me, that even trying to view this game as a fan, and then trying to view it as someone who would be new to the series, no matter which way you view it, or how it was marketed to meant to be not for players of Destiny 1, but more for new people, the game is fundamentally flawed for both. So they tried to hit a mark that was already silly and illogical to hit, and then they somehow fucked that up, which is unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. To not only try and not target a game necessarily at your core audience, but to then absolutely miss the ball and just shove a ton of information down a new player's throat that they just won't give a shit about. Of course, this emotional moment of the ghost explaining to you how he found you and how the Traveller exploded and created the light, and how it all helped you resurrect you and become whatever the fuck a Guardian is, you are a Guardian. It is a lot of emotional weight that they're trying to put on someone that actually has no connection to their ghost if this is a new player. That is the thing. They are trying to simplify the first game's story and a lot of information into an introduction that actually is pandering to an audience who knowingly would have played the first game. I can't see why trying to put some form of emotional connection between a Guardian and their ghost makes any kind of sense if this game was meant to be directed at new players. I think this is something that should have happened when the first city, when your ghost comes up to you and you're wounded. That should be the first kind of emotional, oh my god, you're still alive. I kind of don't give a shit that you're alive because you're just a random machine to me. But now you're explaining, oh, you're important, you can heal me, you can do this. Obviously, being connected to you in some way is important. Doing this during the intro, when they don't even know what a ghost is, to me, makes almost no sense. Now, the recap of the Golden Age and the Traveller's Sacrifice finishes with him obviously creating the ghosts, and then this really cheesy, this is your destiny. Like, no, it's not my fucking destiny, how dare you? My destiny is in my Xbox, and it's Destiny 1. Fuck you, game. Now, this is where the game kind of starts for real. It opens with the amazing Cade waltzing into the Vanguard room, and looking at a storm and then talking to Ikora, who is explaining that the satellites have gone down, followed by, honestly, one of the best opening pieces of music I have ever heard in a game, as Zavala puts up a bubble, shielding as many people as he can from a barrage of missiles. But honestly, go and listen to that piece of music and try and tell me it is not fucking beautiful. If there is one thing Destiny does right, it's music. And as many people hate the Star Wars prequels, I can guarantee you that Duel of the Fates is one of their favourite pieces of Star Wars music, even though it's from what they consider to be some of the worst films of all time.
Libyans. What are the set feeds telling us?
Nothing.
Well, that's good, right?
No. I mean, they're not there. There are no satellites.
And that's not good.
Battle stations! Everyone with me, now!
Hang on!
Now, the assault on the tower is really, really important, because it's establishing the Red Legion as a threat that is coming towards a source of our power, but not only that, they are not fucking scared of attacking us where we would be at most at our highest force. Then, what is strange is this giant Doctor Who looking like ship, that giant web thing in the Christmas special episode, going towards the Traveller. We don't know what its intent is yet. Obviously, if you played the beta, which wouldn't make sense story-wise, you kind of know what it's doing. But, for the sake of this review, I'm going to pretend like I played it and had no clue what that thing's intent was. It then cuts to your Guardian. Now, if you played Destiny 1, it will obviously be your Guardian, which looked very strange. I will admit, the first time I fucking saw them, I was like, what the fuck did they do to you? You look like you had some botched Botox, for Christ's sake. Honestly, it was like the lighting was dialed up to 10 and it never got taken down. And I was wearing what looked like the brightest red lipstick known to fucking man. It was at this point I went online to see what the character customizations would be like if you were a new player. I then found out that it's actually exactly the same, which from a new player's standpoint is completely fine. But for a returning player, if you were to move to PC, you would be kind of in the mindset of, they could have at least added some new things to this. It did feel weird that it was completely the same. It seemed like a cut and paste job, which isn't actually as easy as it sounds when moving from one game to another, but it's still a lot more easy than building everything from the ground up. Now, what happens next is actually a positive on the game's standpoint. I will say this actually caught me completely off guard. I was expecting something like this, but I wasn't expecting it in quite the way it was implemented. There are quite a few lines in the game which are different for a returning player, as to a new player whose Guardian technically had nothing to do with the original story, which does make the Curse of Osiris seem a bit strange, but at the same time I kind of get why they juggled it in that way, but more of that later. It honestly did make me feel very special being recognised by Shaxx in that way. I'm not sure whether it was just the whole nostalgia hitting in and seeing returning characters, or whether it was the fact that it felt like I was knowingly being talked to as someone who has been recognised by these impressive, all-powerful Guardians. Now, something that gets me a lot, and a lot of other people, mind you, is the fact that he is wearing a sword on his back. Now, that sword is called the Razelighter. It was an exotic sword from Destiny 1, and by all rights, it is an extremely hard thing to make. From what I understand of the lore, it's made of hive metal. And hive metal, unlike other resources, isn't just made naturally. It's made from hive materials. Now, hive weaponry is very much alive. It is like them, consume or be consumed. The Ahamkara and the worms inside them was gifted to them by a god, and if they do not keep feeding, they die. And the weapons, in a way, are mirroring that. Their designs and everything about them is beautiful, how it's woven in, and it's quite seamless how it works in that way. So in the first game, we take our exotic swords, and we have to teach them to use the power of light to kill darkness rather than using the power of darkness, which obviously is a quest line. But it's very strange that there is actually in the lore only one of these swords, meaning that Shaxx stole my fucking sword, which I think would have been a really, really cool twist if after the battle you go down and you talk to him at the farm and he either gives you the option to take your sword back and get some form of apology that he didn't actually take anything fucking else from your vault, like all of the cool exotic armor and resources, and if you were a new player, he could have offered you a quest to go into the city to scavenge for something, and you would find an exotic sword. Whether that happens early or late, I would say it would be something that actually happens later, but yes, that is something that I think would have been a very nice touch for returning players to get their fucking exotic sword back, maybe even in legendary form, I don't know, and then for other players to be able to talk to him, and then later on in the game he'll offer you a quest to go and scavenge the old tower, and you would find the raise lighter. I do find it strange that the game's explanation for you losing all of your stuff was that it was destroyed in the tower. It does just seem odd that there wouldn't have been either remnants of your stuff that you could collect in some way if you were a returning player, or like people like Shaxx, it would have been kind of cool to be able to go up to them and reclaim some of your stuff, rather than him keeping it for himself, the fucking greedy cunt. Anyway, moving on. Once again, we see the bubble being used to be a really helpful tool. And this is something I found very strange. You run in and out of it, and Zavala will say, "Guardian, come here, blah blah blah," and he'll put up a bubble and avoid all of the rockets that are coming towards you. It seems strange that they put so much emphasis twice now on the shield being a very useful tool against big enemies, aka something like a raid enemy, to then change the bubble in such a way that it's basically useless. From what I know, the bubble is still in the game if you hold down the super button, but it's fucking useless. So it just feels really dumb to have that in the game. Now, this is meant to make us feel horrible, in a way. Not the bubble thing, this part, the tower being attacked, and for returning players, there was some nice little homages, like you can hear the Hope for the Future song, like Hope for the Future, like that being played on the tower and everything like that, and all the ships being wrecked, which for someone who is returning is like, oh my god, I know this place, I used to walk through here all the time, blah blah blah, I heard that song played in the Hunter Lounge, whoa. And it's meant to feel lived in, which in my opinion fails fucking spectacularly. Now, the reason I think this fails spectacularly is because there was something, I'm assuming, for the press side of it, or whether it was just someone came up with the idea, to make that one section with Zavala multiplayer. It feels really weird going from single player out into this big open area, which if you are a returning player, you know is where you spawn in on the tower. As a new player, it just looks like a big open courtyard, to where fucking XX Jimmy Cocknose XX69 can be just teabagging Zavala before he gets fucking arse blasted by a bunch of missiles. The tonal shift just makes no sense to me, and I would have either preferred that they just completely make that mission multiplayer, or they cut out the middleman and say the press stuff was just press stuff and we didn't get it to work properly, so we just don't want other players in your story. Simple, clean, concise, just no issues, none of this changing between things. It just felt odd and very out of touch. It completely ruined the tonal shift for me. After all that happens with the Ikora nonsense and everything, we get into a ship with the love of my life, Amanda Holiday. I swear I crush on any girl with a southern accent. I've crushed on her since day one. Moving on. This is probably one of my favourite scenes in the entire game. It's such an awesome ship fighting scene. but it should have been playable. Now, I know people are going to say, well, it would have probably been on rails, but when you're playing a video game, I honestly think never show what you can't be playing. Never show us these amazing things over and over and over again if you're never going to let us play that. But I digress. It's something that I understand might have not been implemented well, but Halo Reach did it kind of shoddily, and it was still fucking fun. Flying spaceships is fun. It just is. Now, this is basically where we meet our antagonist after we do some in-game stuff. Obviously, run somewhere, show your ghost a wall panel. Woohoo! You're done. Gaul. Now, this scene is very odd, and I'd like to do a little reenactment here. Who are these guys?
It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our plan. We don't have to stand on ceremony here, do we, Guardian?
Guardian, the light. My light. Hello, Flo.
I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit or your body. Ah, you think the light is your ally. You merely adopted the light. I was born in it, molded by it. I hear you had some relationship problems with the ground. Let me reacquaint you.
No, not my limited edition ghost shell.
I'm not going to kill you, Guardian. Your punishment must be more severe. I am Gaul, and your light belongs to me.
Suck my Now, weird comedy skits aside, this is something that I really didn't quite understand. Gaul is this awesome big creature that wants to prove himself as powerful to the Traveller. Now, the Consul is also someone who's saying, yes, this is the right way to go, steal the power of the Traveller. And a lot of people have called the Traveller different things. Once again, we'll touch on that in a minute when we actually get to that scene. But it feels odd that the Red Legion is so pussyfooting around this. Where is the fucking Cabal that fucking nosedived a ship into the Dreadnought to make a beachhead to start a one-man war against goddamn Oryx, with one ship trying to take on a hive god? I feel like stripping us of our light is a really weird ass-backwards way that the Cabal Legion wouldn't do. I feel like the Red Legion would want to fight us in our tower at full strength and prove they are the strongest, not strip us of our power and then kill us like we're kittens. It just doesn't seem like the Cabal way. But this is kind of explained that they're not the same as the Cabal Legion, and they might have to use tactics that are a bit underhanded. But yeah, that is just a bit of a nitpick for me personally. I just think it's a bit odd. This part also, admittedly, kind of confused me. Being stripped of our light, shouldn't we not be alive? I'm really not quite sure what Guardians are at this point. I thought we were like, I guess light zombies in some way. We were just being kept alive by the light. And it really does seem like the light right here is being used as a Deus Ex Machina. We get kicked off of the ship to our, quote, death. And if it wasn't for the God-given right of plot fucking armor, I cannot see how we did not die from that fall. We fall so far down. We fall on ungodly fucking... just so... Master Chief would be proud. Even though he did it better, he still would be proud. And this is kind of the tipping point and where things start to go off the rails a bit for me. There's some trippy fucking visions of the Traveller's triangles again, which, as I said, at this point you have no clue what those are, but I'm guessing that is the ancient enemy, as we'll discuss later on, which yet still makes no sense to a new player, and even to a player that's coming back is still a bit like, what the fuck is going on? Then we wake up, really bruised, beaten, armor completely destroyed, and we're limping through the city for what is, in my opinion, a little bit too long, but I like it. I do like the whole making us feel weak, and the ghost coming up and saying, I can only heal you, I can't revive you, which I don't quite understand why he can still heal but not revive, because isn't he made of light? Plot stuff that I quite honestly can't be fucked looking up. But yeah, it just to me didn't make huge amounts of sense, which, to be honest, if it's not making as much sense to someone who is a bit of a lore nut, it's going to make fucking no sense to a new player, which is one of the things I'm trying to cover with this. But Deus Ex Ghost Machina aside, I'm guessing we're sort of weaker now, which is meant to be the point. And they tried to point this home by, and this is where things kind of go on a roller coaster and go 90 degrees into fucking Bonkersville. These Guardians were powerless and slaughtered without their light. Now, we pick up one submachine gun off of them, and then all of a sudden fend off a pack of dogs and just so many other things as one Guardian. Why were these other 3 Guardians so fucking useless? We wipe out a ton of enemies in our path with seemingly no issue at all. It's as if those other Guardians were being played by people with no hands. And an even bigger pisser is that if you look at the crates and the sleeping bags around, they are like faction people. They are people who were in factions, which, considering they got taken out of the game to then be later put back in as events, which was basically spitting in the face of old players, which wouldn't affect new players, they wouldn't really care. But as old players, we looked at that and thought, oh, the factions, cool, I remember those. And then they're not there. It did seem very weird to put so much focus on these things to then rip them away when it came to the main game. I swear, I'm not biased, I just keep coming across things that I can compare. I swear it. At this point, something really weird happens where the ghost points out a falcon. And he says, are we following it, or is it following us? I think it's actually the other way around. But we are following it, it's clearly always in front of us, so yeah, and we're on a linear path. It just seemed like a very stupid thing to point out. We later find that it is a falcon called Lewis, and it belongs to Hawthorne, who is a very strong female protagonist, person of colour type, which has a stick up her ass. For some reason, this seems to be the only way they are able to write in female characters at Bungie. They always have to be these grossly, I hate the main thing. Why can't someone like Amanda Holliday just exist as a main story character? Which I guess in this they're a bit more focused on, but as of yet, main females a lot of the time in gaming tend to always be this stereotype of character, that they are, I'm just so much cooler than the Guardians because I want to live on my own. And she has a grudge against the Guardians that you don't understand yet, which is mainly because she wanted to leave the city, yada yada yada, and yeah. She says that the bird is the best pilot they have, which honestly I can completely believe considering we can't fly. And it was at this point that the scene pans out and you see a bunch of ships. Hawthorne turns around to you, throws you your shotgun, which at this point is your power weapon, filling out all 3 slots because you had the pistol from the beginning, the submachine gun as a primary, actually I think it's the other way around, and the shotgun that fixed the power slot, which is a huge fucking problem. But yes, it is done. We are gonna get to fly these ships. Then it cuts to the Red Legion. And I thought, wow, we have asked for ship flying for so long that every time I see a ship, independently from me not going to the tower, I think I come. Honestly, I just want flying. And every time I think we're gonna fly, she even says, are you ready to fly, basically? And then we cut to the Red Legion. I still had my fingers crossed. but I kinda knew it was never coming. It's at this point we find out what that giant Doctor Who looking ship actually is for. It is for taking away the light. Now, the console mentions that other civilizations have more adequately put what the Traveller is in their own words, which I think would have been interesting for them to dive into, or they could have said something. It, to me, is kind of like when in Doctor Who it talks about the people of the forest, their word for warrior is doctor, and how the Doctor is changing the word doctor into meaning warrior and fighter and killer amongst the galaxy. And it's that oh shit moment of, what have I become?
Every time you've asked, I have been there. Where the hell were you today?
I couldn't have prevented this.
You could have tried.
And so, my love, could you? I know you're not all right, but hold tight, Amy, because you're going to be.
You think I wanted this? I didn't do this. This wasn't me.
This was exactly you. All this. All of it. You make them so afraid. When you began all those years ago, sailing off to see the universe, did you ever think you'd become this? The man who can turn an army around at the mention of his name. Doctor. The word for healer and wise man throughout the universe. We get that word from you, you know. But if you carry on the way you are, what might that word come to mean? To the people of the Gamma Forests, the word doctor means mighty warrior. How far you've come. And now they've taken a child, the child of your best friends, and they're going to turn her into a weapon just to bring you down. And all this, my love, in fear of you.
Now, I'm going to get back to the story here by saying we arrive at the new tower, which is called the farm in this, which is where, it's a bit odd. And this is where alarm bells rang like a fucking siren in my head, when the first thing, rather than factions, I see Eververse. And she even has a quippy one-liner saying, do you think the end of the world was going to stop me? No one wanted that. No one wanted to hear the place I can spend real fucking money is quippy and a cunt. My whole fire team scoffed at this moment. They all did. I asked them afterwards and they all said, yes. I was fucking just, ugh. It made my fucking blood boil. Especially considering they fucking targeted you and made you go to her to collect a shell. If I remember, I think it was a shell. Now, this is where I'm going to start taking bigger strides over the story, because I don't want to sit here explaining the entire thing, because that would literally take about 8 hours, even if the story is only about fucking 4 hours long. And the next mission is for the Shard of the Traveller. Now, looking at the Doctor Who style crack in space thing and getting our powers restored was kind of cool, I will admit. But I'm also kind of the mindset, of course we don't have to go the entire game without our powers, but it seems a bit dumb that all stakes have now been taken away. There was a 6-month time gap that happened, if you don't know, in the story in the first part of the game. And I personally would have liked to maybe have played some of that, rather than it just being a time gap, because I, as a player, don't feel like the stakes have been raised at all, because I feel just as powerful as I did with my light, because, well, what did I really get to experience of it in this game? I ran through the tower for 20 seconds. All I did with that is use my gun mainly, and maybe a super once. Fucking big deal, you know? As a returning player, I know what it's like to have light, I know how powerful supers are. But it doesn't really ring home with a new player. And it kind of doesn't ring home with a returning player either, because the super you get is different from the ones you know. And I can tell you, the first time I saw Arcstrider, my fucking literal noise was like, ah! I was so fucking excited. I couldn't contain myself how awesome it was to finally use Arcstrider properly in PvE settings. But yes, it was cool. But I do think there needed to be more of the game where we were struggling. Because the moment you literally get your Deus Ex Ghost back that can revive you from anything, the stakes feel completely gone. Especially as a new player, How would it feel to be them? I don't know, because all the characters whose lives are actually in danger, you have no prior connection to. Why the fuck would you care if Cade's gone off and died, other than the fact he's voiced by Nathan Fillion, which by intergalactic rights makes him the coolest being in the universe? And now I'm taking an even bigger step. I'm completely fucking stepping over Devram and his new recipe. Honestly, the long and short of it is, the new people who are kind of meant to replace the factions are kind of alright. You go to place, you shoot a guy, you go back to them with tokens, blah blah blah. And yeah, whatever. It's really my first major complaint about the vanilla game, and even, I guess this does carry over to the Curse of Osiris as well, but there should never have been any trivializing of exotics. Getting exotics during the campaign was probably the most ball-busting mistake they ever fucking made. I honestly cannot explain to you how much this damaged the late game. Not only do they feel underpowered, but they don't feel like they're rewarding when you're given them at level 5 from a random NPC for doing what feels like just a random mission. It's just given to you. And they don't feel like they're worth the exotic slot. Now, this is being addressed currently, and like with the Go Fast update that is out, I am not going to completely skim over them, but I'm going to say I'm reviewing this as why the game lost 80% of its fucking player base, and this is honestly one of the biggest reasons. Trivializing exotics is such a huge problem, and modern gaming has done this in quite a few ways. And I'm going to really talk about Destiny 1 here quite a bit. Do you remember, if you are a Destiny 1 player, or if you've played even The Division, the first time you ever saw an exotic engram, or that lime green light in The Division? It was, "We are fucking Alpha Bravo unit team, you fucking got my back, we're getting to fucking extraction, lay down your lives and cover in fire for my fucking item." This is the difference. The very first time that you grinded in Destiny 1, with people doing loot caves or anything, there would be hundreds of greens, 2 blues, and 1 legendary. In Destiny 2, it's hundreds of blues, so they've already trivialized the things before that. There's hundreds of legendaries. Trivialize that. When it comes to Destiny 1, the first time you saw a legendary or an exotic drop, you would delete blues in your inventory, engrams, to get them. In Destiny 1 there was even a problem that exotics and legendaries could decant at lower values. Meaning, I don't know why I said decant, that's not the right word, but yeah, they could basically come out as blues if it was a legendary, and an exotic could become a legendary. So every time you got an exotic, you were literally little... You would not let anyone near you. You would want to leave immediately, go back to the tower, and fucking get that thing decrypted. And when it comes to things like Vault of Glass, you did not want to skip exotic chests, because they gave you such opportunity to get unbelievably powerful gear. But that has been taken away completely in Destiny 2, because you're getting it from completely trivial events. In general, I think the loot progression was in the completely wrong order. Now, if yes, I understand if a level 40 character on Destiny 1 goes back and does a level 22 quest, and they're going to be rewarded a blue, you're going to look at someone and say, is it really necessary for you to fucking even give me that shit, knowing I'm just going to delete it? But as a completionist, I have done every single quest on every single character. And honestly, is it really that big of a deal for me to just delete a couple blues and just realise, yeah, I should have done that quest ages ago? But it also means, as a PvE-focused game, which is not what Destiny 2 wanted to be, it helps the little guy that needs a few little extra light levels to get further in the game, which Destiny 2 completely trivialized, and we will get on that later because I have a fucking big bit about that, but Jesus Christ does that need work. Those missions in Destiny 1 had meaning. There was a reason to get light levels because you could feel it. With Destiny 2 being what effectively was a PvP-focused game, it really was meant to be a PvP-focused game, You don't put all of your eggs in the PvP basket if your stats say the majority of your audience were PvE players and the PvP players were a separate audience and sometimes crossed over with things like Iron Banner. The RPG elements of Destiny 1 needed to be solid. It honestly is so ridiculous that they focused on a PvP side of things. It would, like me, be hiring Charles Manson to babysit my 1-year-old. Not only is that a very bad idea, it's going to end with some form of religious group fucking kicking your door in, which in this case is the PvE and lore community. Now, while we're on the subject of lore, there's a character archetype that I fucking hate in gaming and films, and sometimes they can be done okay, and they're normally done as background or side characters that don't see the limelight at all. And that is characters like Asher Mir. They are characters that are designed to be annoying. Stop putting these characters in fucking games, for the love of Christ. Because they are designed to be hated. They are designed to be annoying. Which is okay in a small part of a game. But when he is going to be dictating every mission and talking to you every time a public event happens or a strike happens, it gets fucking old. His comedy gets old. He wasn't that funny to begin with. And the worst thing is, as a lore fan, it felt like he didn't know what he was talking about. Now, of course, this is something that could be explained by other things, but he very openly says that the Pyramidium is basically in a constant flux. It is something that's in a different space-time, and it's changing constantly. So, there was a lot of stuff here that felt like it was changing constantly, like he says. He then turns around, and every single time, the main joke of the Pyramidium strike is how he doesn't believe you that there's no lake, which to me screams that they just had no clue what to do with his character here or what to do with the story here. Yes, he's someone that's meant to never be able to take it when he's wrong. Yes, he's a character that finds it hard when he sees things that are impossible. But when you're talking about a shape-shifting, time-altering, just place, a reality that can do anything, why would you ever question that it changed? Why would it be impossible? Impossible! Because you quite simply said in a few lines before how it's completely probable. But this doesn't just affect Asher. IO in general, in the whole game, is the worst place for multiple reasons. It's not just that their basically faction rally person is shit, or whatever the fuck they're meant to be, their vendor. The whole place feels like it's completely empty, and makes little to no sense. Not just in game, but also in reality. There's actually a lot of science to why IO would be a fucking terrible place for life to form. But that's completely separate because, yeah, this is just different. Just saying, go and look up. There was a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous volcanic eruption there. Go look that up. But yeah, as a space to play in, it's just bad. It feels like it wasn't developed properly. It speaks to a place that had an idea of lots of open driving around, a bit like the moon from Destiny 1, but with nothing in it. It just doesn't feel complete. Now, there is also kind of hints to this that I can't remember whether an adventure covers this or not, and I've gone back to look to see what they were, but yeah, you can't just replay whatever you want in this game, because for some reason they thought that would be a fucking terrible thing to do. But when I go back there is a hole under a drill, which looks like it's a secret, but you die when you try to go down there. Tried for ages, but you just die. It just feels odd that that's there. I would just seal it up, but if it is for an adventure, then I admit that I'm wrong, but I just can't remember. But if there is one thing that describes Destiny 2, and a lot of its adventures and everything while they were cool, is forgettable. Forgettable really is a lot of this game. And speaking of forgettable, there are a few things people commented up that, if I'm wrong once again, please fill me in. the very first Iron Banner that came out, we had Lord Saladin saying, I'm the last of the Iron Lords on his description. Not us, as in me, as a Guardian. Him, as he is the last of the Iron Lords. Not to mention that there was things about Ephrodite, or I think her name's Ephrodite, Lady Ephrodite? Whatever the fuck her name was. Effigy and Saladin. Why was this a thing? How did this happen? The very last line of the last DLC was... which I just can't understand where they went so wrong with this, or how someone didn't understand the story. But as I said, it could just be me, and I could be wrong. I've looked up things, I can't find an answer, but yeah. The only answer people say is maybe he was saying the original Iron Lords on his thing. Then why wouldn't it say the last of the original Iron Lords? Just my take. Now we're going to go back to the gameplay here, because this is something I've wanted to harp on for the longest fucking time. I even covered it in one of my last videos. It's something that pisses me off to no end, mainly because one of the in-game item even explains my feelings. It's the fucking lack of a sparrow during the main campaign. Not only is it that the sparrows in general feel like they're made of cardboard, they absolutely drive like shit in comparison to their predecessor. And the fact that they artificially extended the game is, in my eyes, just disgusting. The fact you should even feel a moment that you have to spend real money to get a sparrow to speed up your in-game progress is so bad, and it shows the fact they were trying to force players to either spend money to get through the game faster, or worse, they wanted to pad out their game time because they weren't confident with how fucking short the game was. Now, when I'm talking about something that captures my in-game feelings, there is a sparrow called the Noble Steed, and it states... every Guardian needs one. It is so true. It is core to a Guardian. One of the first things you do in the first game is settle down and get your ship, get your Ghost and Sparrow. You are set. These are all you need to conquer the fucking galaxy, as a warp drive, a Sparrow, and your fucking gun. It's like a fucking American shootout in here. Oh, it's really ridiculous that they absolutely cut this off. I don't know whether you can even spend money to buy one beforehand, but all I can tell you is one of the main reasons I actually wanted to make this video is I went back to play during this Go Fast update, and I went on my Hunter, and I didn't really notice much except for the Arcstrider being amazing, and I thought, I'll do an Ikora mission. While on the Ikora mission, I couldn't summon my Sparrow, and I couldn't use any emotes, which was extremely odd to me, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me why. I tried changing things, and I thought, well, it's probably because they wanted to limit these things to make sure people couldn't speed through the game, and for some reason, they must have fucked up with the emotes. Not to mention that replaying that mission, why in the fucking world... A, can we replay them through, quote, meditation? Why in our meditations, if we're not going through some form of time travel, or some form of simulation, is the Leviathan eating the planet in Nessus? I look up and I see the Leviathan, and no one is talking about it. It just sort of sits there. And it honestly speaks to a really, really artificially inflated campaign that had no idea what it was going to be doing, and what other people were going to be doing with it, and then they all meshed their ideas together, realised that, oh shit, they're going to conflict, so let's try and cut corners where we can. But now, all of that shit aside, the biggest jump to come, you've done it. You've conquered the evil Gull. Well, the Traveller did. You just sort of shot at him a little bit. And, yeah, some ominous triangles sort of turned towards the Earth while some Inception horns went off. And, well, you put 2 and 2 together. 4 sides from 2 and 2. That's a square. Take away one of the sides. Oh my god. We have a fucking triangle. It's the Traveller's long lost love. The triangle enemy. Or whatever the fuck they actually are. I'm assuming that this is going to be the Taken King size expansion that's going to be considered sort of like, you know, later on in the year, considering Curse of Osiris is already out and the Warmind DLC is kind of already completely out in some aspects of story. And yeah, it's either going to be a colossal, amazing thing, or it's going to be complete garbage. And considering the way these people handled the story so far, I have a feeling their explanation of the darkness is going to be just completely rubbish. But that is for the future. As I said, that's the ending of the game, and yeah, it's a bit meh. It's not amazing. We now come to one of the most interesting portions of this, which I really hope people stick around and actually listen up to this point, because I think this is where my analysis is really going to break into the differences and the core problem with Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, which is the raid. I feel like the raid layers is a fucking fantastic idea. It was just executed fucking horrendously. That and the fact that things like the Sparrows and the Ghosts were all put in the Eververse store, and the shader system was butchered so it could be monetized, and so it kind of fucked up a lot of different systems. A lot of that mismanagement, yeah, put that aside for now. We'll talk about that later, as I say about a lot of things, but yeah, this is just going to be a little bit about the raid itself and not the problems that it kind of created. The quest-based exotics are cool. In Destiny 1, they were fantastic. In Destiny 2, the Legendary Acreus, especially right now, is overpowered as fuck. Having all of the exotics being quest ones was kind of dumb. I think there definitely should have been some Vex Mythoclast, or even something like a Galahorn that can kind of come from anywhere that needed to be hunted for. Because I think most people will always say some of their greatest memories was the Mythoclast, was getting the Sparrows and all of the ships from the raids. I still don't have some of those fucking ships from the Crota raid, I've just never been able to get them. Getting some amazing loot in general is what makes these games feel amazing. Now, we look back at Destiny 1 and we see why they were so good. The armor and the shells, the capes, the weapons, everything just looked so fucking good. And it makes no sense that they removed a lot of the cool factor and the uniqueness of the weapons, because it's an RPG. In the end of the day, it is an RPG. And they might have fucking removed the entire campaign and put Monopoly there for 4 hours. It would have been as damaging as changing the loot system so it affects the raid in this way. Loot is king. It is what we do everything for. As Cade in the trailer says, there's gonna be tons of loot, and everyone gets fucking hyped. Helping others get loot felt good. Helping them do things in the raid felt good, because even though I might have everything, it still felt good to get the loot for some reason. Because the loot was interesting. And I can't tell you how many people my team has carried through Vogue, Crota, and Kingsfall. All because those raids, fundamentally, even before all the loot, felt fucking amazing. And the rewards were fantastic. Adding to it were the challenges, which then made the raid feel even more important and even more amazing. Because you wanted to do the challenges. You could do the raid normally, and you could get all this cool loot, but you have a chance to get a little bit cooler loot if you do the challenge. It flirted with you, and it gave an option for people who have bested the raid to show their power and come out of their comfort zone and kick the fucking raid in the arse. And that is good games design. That is fantastic games design. God, I want to play this raid. They really were the icing on the cake. Adding those challenges and showing that kind of commitment to your community, showing you know how they play, we're gonna fuck that shit up. That is how you do it. As I explained earlier, it's that curveball. It's so important, and I remember them so fondly because of the impact they made. Now, the raids in Destiny 1 did have puzzles during combat, and puzzles in between combat, like going from War Priest to Gogoroth. Necessarily a puzzle with no combat, and then there was going to Gogoroth Two Daughters, where it wasn't combat, but you were getting killed a lot. You don't always have combat as something with just enemies. In a sense, combat can be environmental, which I think they really, really did fantastically in Destiny 1, with things like the Gogoroth maze having holes, or the ship puzzle. All these things were combat in a different light. Your weapons and power was different. You had to use knowledge and remembering, and you know what? It fucking works, because like with the Omnigul thing, it feels good to conquer something to a point where you master it. And that is something core to RPGs, and that is what Destiny is. So, when it comes to the Leviathan, the underbelly felt amazing, and it felt like a complete thing. And I have a feeling that the Leviathan's underbelly was meant to be a really big part of the raid. But it's not telegraphed that way. A new player to the raid, we found the underbelly before we even went up to the door. We opened it with the 6 people in one room, we explored the underbelly for ages, and then everyone went to bed, because we were in there for so fucking long. Now, that's awesome, but going in there should have made an easy path to the first part of the raid. Now, they wanted to do something different by making it so that the raid can be something different every single week, but in a different order, basically. That is a cool idea in practice, but in actuality what you have is 4 mediocre challenges with mediocre in-betweens, all for the sake of some form of gimmick, when sometimes it's better to go for something linear and do it right, which is, as I said earlier, sometimes something well told that's linear will outbeat something like an open world with lots of variation, because you a lot of the time have to sacrifice good storytelling and good environment design to the altar of gimmick, and that is exactly what this raid did. Now, not only that, it also suffers when it comes to things like the actual engagements. I feel like they went too heavy on the puzzle side of things, and thought, oh, everyone really wants to just do Gorgons for 9 hours, is what it felt like when playing the new raid. And it did just feel mismanaged. And I'm going to compare 2 things now, which I'm not going to compare them as raids. I'm going to take bits out of 2 raids and compare them. Now, raid layers, in their own thing, are nice, short, sweet experiences, and I think the raid layer is a lot better than the first raid, but it's a bit short and easy, personally, so I think there could be some development there. But the bits I'm actually going to focus on is the War Priest fight and the Gauntlet. Now, if you didn't play Destiny 1, War Priest was this big, awesome-looking cross between a brute from Halo and an elite from Halo. It looks like they had a baby, and considering Destiny 2 writers have kind of said Grimoire is folklore, you have no proof that isn't what he is. He could be that. And with War Priest, he really was a cool-looking creature, with a very cool entrance. But not only was it cool, it actually very, very subtly telegraphed what you might have to do during the fight. Now, the Gauntlet, on the other hand, is in a sense a very similar encounter. With War Priest and the Gauntlet, you both enter a room, and the first thing you see is plates. So everyone jumps on the plates, whether it be the 4 plates in Gauntlet or the 3 plates in War Priest. Everyone gets into positions. With War Priest, it's 2-2-2, and in Gauntlet, you do 2 in one place, 2 in another, and then 2 people on their own. And that's obviously not the modern way of doing it, but I'm explaining the very first time you ever walk into the room. Now, you have a phase of ads, and then what happens is a in-between phase happens. Now, this is something that the very first time is going to catch you off guard. It's going to be the Hollowed Knights, and they might kill you. But if you kill them, it will show that that is the beginning of a new part of the engagement. And it's the same with the Legionnaires and Gauntlet. Once all the ads are cleared, the Legionnaires die, and an orb spawns. It's showing that you have beaten the first wave of things in this fight and you are moving on to the next part. These things are very clever mechanics because they are not only a sign that the fight is changing for the first time, they also become staples later on when you're more used to the raid as, Hollowed are spawning, or Knights are coming out, or Legionnaires are coming out, and it shows, get ready for the next phase of the fight. Now, this is where they both enter with a wipe mechanic for the first time. After you do the killing of the 3 Hollowed Knights, it says something at the bottom left, I can't quite remember to be honest, and if you don't do anything, the plates just set on fire and you wipe. The first time you enter the gauntlet, you stand there with an orb, you see an orb of light, you jump up, you grab it, and you can't go through the gate. It's just blocking you. You ask, what's on the outside? They say, arrows, plates, so they all try standing on the plates, they all shoot the arrows, it goes, fails, because you shot the wrong arrow, or maybe you shot the right arrow for the first time. And this is where things start getting bad in the gauntlet's design. With the design of the room of War Priest, there are 2 rooms at the back of his lair. There are 2 rooms up where he is standing. When you first enter the room and you see Oryx's head, those 3 rocks that are dangling in the centre of the room glow. And if you have anyone back there, you will notice the backs of them glow and then go dark. Or you'll notice the front does the same thing. But the front doesn't light up after the Hollowed Knights are killed. But what are you likely to do is run into those back rooms to search for something or to distract him to try and find what your next objective is, which is where, as you're coming out, you'll see, oh my god, that thing's light up. Stand on the plate that correlates to that one. So left obviously is right because it's back to back, and that's a nice mechanic because it's easy to find and it's in a way difficult the first time you do it because you're like left, and then the left people stand on, you're like no, my left, your left, etc, etc. When it comes to Gauntlet, the main problem here is not player choice, it's luck. The very first time that those orbs spawn, they can spawn in the same exact place, and you can either fail or you can succeed the first time. And then you have conflicting people saying what they did, they shot this plate, they shot that plate, and it worked. Now, the chance of that happening is very low, but the chance of it spawning in the same place is actually quite high, which implements a level of chance of where people actually try and find things out. And it speaks to me volumes that this was designed in such a way where the developers weren't looking at it with fresh eyes. And that is something in games design which is akin to a death sentence. It just is. Because you're looking at something, knowing the answers, trying to look at it as someone who doesn't. And it seems obvious to people, but it actually really isn't. So with War Priest, there's many ways you can find out what to do. Either through trial and error on the plates, or you can actually look around the room. With Gauntlet, there's no real trial and error here because nothing in the game has ever told you the answer to Gauntlet. And the answer is to shoot the reverse to what is shown to the player inside. So not only do they have to find out which plates are where they start, when they have to look above and see there's a dog correlating to axes, dogs, etc, etc, they also have to be able to say, okay, top, and then 2 people have to decide to also say, alright, let's try shooting both of these arrows that are the opposite to this. Nowhere in the game has that level of design been anywhere, and there is nothing in the room that suggests that is the case. So it makes absolutely no fucking sense that that is in the game. It is like me taking a puzzle and taking a piece of it, shooting it into orbit, and then asking you to complete the puzzle, and telling you that the piece exists after a while, and it's in somewhere around, but I didn't tell you it's been shot into space, and the chances of you finding this piece is next to 0. Do you not see how it's very easy for a developer to look at something they know the answers to, and maybe say, oh, that's logical, but to look at it as a fresh player, it's basically like giving someone a puzzle without any means to finding that mysterious piece. Make sense? Now, what this kind of thing entails is they wanted these kind of things to be solved on stream, because this is what they did, is they watched streamers and they hinted at them on what they might want to do. But the problem is I'm not a famous streamer. I didn't want to watch a famous streamer play the raid, I wanted to play it for my fucking self. So I didn't have my little bungee budgie on my shoulder telling me part of the answer. And we had to go and ruin the raid for ourselves by opening up a stream and finding the answers to a puzzle which we didn't have the means to solve, which ruined part of the raid for us and also made the experience feel fucking cheap. Overall, balancing these two out is difficult, I will admit that. It's not an easy task, but this is what they are paid for. And it's ridiculous that we gave them our money for them to basically shit down our throat. And comparing the two, you can really see how the fundamentals are so misguided and mismanaged when it comes to the design of the raid over the playability of the raid. Playability is important. Design is where things start. If that is fucked, everything above it is also fucked. It's like a cake. If you bake the fucking core of the cake out of shit, no matter how good the icing looks, it's still going to have a shit piece in the middle. Does that make sense? I know it's like weird to say, but I am talking here as a designer that kind of looks at these things and has to be critical about them, because I have to do it with my own work. And one of the things that I noticed is I look at my work nowadays and I'm like, man, my work is fucking shit, I hate it. And do you know why I don't like it? It's nothing to do with my work. It's because it's easier to learn what makes work good, and it's faster to learn what makes work good than it is to make things that look good. So my knowledge of what makes things look good is now going ahead of my skills at crafting good-looking work. So I'm looking at it from a more not intellectual, but a more critical eye and a more experienced eye, which is what I think Bungie needed to do, is get people in to sit down and say, okay, we're going to try and solve this with no hints and see how long it takes. And it would have shown them in one sitting what the fuck is wrong with that raid. Now, this is going to now talk about the parts that were just shit in general. I'm not going to talk about all of it, but the glitches in this raid are just ridiculous. The dogs seeing people that are on pedestals should just never be a thing. They just shouldn't be. If you have a crystal in your hand, you should just become an entity completely separate from any other thing in the room. It should not be something that happens in a game. Nowadays, it just shouldn't happen. The fucking Kala shield that every now and then would just wipe you completely. Also, the fact that we had once one of the fucking poor little woof-woofs ran into the goddamn... dogs. I don't know why I said woof-woofs. Ran into the fucking spawn room with us and got wedged in the door. Like, what the fuck is actual happening? And there's also the elusive legend of the crypt. I'm pretty sure this was written down in some form of Egyptian prophecy somewhere. And I personally go by the changing helmets when people won't spawn in. But there are some lunatics that say changing any armor works, but... I'm pretty sure this is how the Catholics and the Protestants started. I'm just like, don't you dare tell me any armor worked, for I, a priest of the Order of Changing Helms, shall smite thee, rebel scum. Odd religious segue and Star Wars reference aside, speaks volumes to me. It just speaks absolute volumes to me that this raid was so poorly made and so poorly optimized that when you spawn in, sometimes your fucking whole team might not come with you. It honestly is ridiculous. The second raid layer didn't have as many problems, but then again, it's honestly shorter than a Mayfly sex life, which is not very long if you know how long a Mayfly lives, and a bit like a Mayfly sex life, it's kind of easier to swallow, so it's not actually as bad. I really do think the second raid layer is a good improvement on the system. Now, we're sucking off mayflies. Yeah, just don't know where I went with that. This script is absolutely ridiculously long right now, and I am shitting myself at the idea of editing this. And it's got so many words in it that I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. But let's carry on and talk about the rest of the game. Because I was going to separate this into parts, but I've decided I'm fucking mad. Now, this is going to be kind of some lightning round things. A bit like with the raid, I'm going to ignore that there are some really big problems, like the fact that there was no strike-specific loot, like the fact that some of the strike bosses, the invisible guy, had absolutely laughable design, and I honestly think I would have got better design out of college students than out of a professional company at this point. I'm also not going to talk about the fact that the difficulty curve was completely asinine in the late game. I'm actually going to talk about my scarred anus. Now, hold on 1 second, Charlie. Don't leave just yet. I mean in-game. I'm going to talk about the difficulty curve that I think is more important. It's a difficulty curve that you will remember if you're a Destiny 1 player. Do you remember this fucking place? I'm going to show a recording. Does it bring you nightmares? True nightmares? Do you remember getting your shit pushed in by this fucking guy? Then you're a fucking Destiny 1 player, my friend. Well done. Here's your fucking half-baked sequel. And Destiny 1 was not afraid to absolutely push your shit in when you were out of your depth. The original Nightfall, one fuck up, and it was back to orbit, Major Tom, you cunt. Where with Destiny 2, I was something like a light level 70, or sorry, power level 70, when I was taking on Gaul, the final boss, and I hardly noticed a difference. And I did solo all of my playthroughs. There just needs to be a challenge curve. There is no point not punishing a player, which sounds really strange, but a lot of the time RPG players are masochists, and we don't want you to treat us like we've been going for too long. No, that's the point. We've been going for long. We don't want you to take it easy on us. We want you to take us behind a spaceship and give me a fucking good seeing to. Most people will remember things like Randall the Vandal, because he was a fucking legend. And he even got a cameo in the later raids, because he made such an impact on the community. That is what challenge offers, and that is what you took away from the entirety of the base game leading up to what was meant to be the challenging content, and none of it was a challenge, ever. I really think the final fight with Gaul encapsulates everything wrong with Destiny 2. It really, really was not only way too easy, he didn't have anything interesting about him, and it really was meant to just be there as a showcase. And he has such an awesome lead-up that you think this is going to be a do-or-die test of my skills, when in actual fact it was just hilarious and utterly pointless. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a gag here, and I'm actually going to disclaimer it once again, because I actually know CinemaSins did this joke. And unfortunately, I actually found this out after writing this in my script, but it's something too good to not put in. So, here you go. A copy and paste job. Fuck you, Internet.
Fitting your traveler would send you to face me once more. Look upon me. Dominus of the Red Legion. Annihilator of suns, raiser of 1,000 worlds, slayer of gods and conqueror of the light, I am Gaul!
This is Jon Snow. He's king in the north.
Now, with all this stupidness aside, I want to now talk about the Curse of Osiris, or as I call it, the Curse of Oshitrus. Grimoire being removed was a mistake. It really was. I think they should have kept it in the way it was, or just moved it onto a Cortex. Of course, I think a Cortex would have been absolutely amazing. Now, the reason I'm talking about this, even though I said I'm going to talk about the Curse of Osiris, is because it harps back to what I said earlier, with that they really, really didn't manage to do this story well, and there were so many, like, short cliches and shit moments all put together that just really didn't ring home in this kind of story. Now, handling a Cortex, I really can't see how, for a AAA industry company, it's that difficult. They've already kind of made it, and it's the scannable system. Literally, I've said this, they just need to have it when you scan something, it just unlocks the exact same audio file, but in a menu. The reason this isn't a thing, and one of the biggest reasons, is they said their tools are too difficult to use. And companies like Square Enix, when they were trying to make Final Fantasy 15, or as I know it, Final Fantasy Versus, because I waited fucking 15 years for the bloody game, they knew that it would be too hard to make. Same with Kingdom Hearts 3. So what did they do? They made the games and they were absolute garbage and they rushed them out. No, wait, no they didn't. They waited fucking absolutely a ridiculous amount of time, revisiting the project loads of times, mismanaging it to shit, but all round coming out with a great product because they reworked their crappy systems. Now, there are so many good free game engines out there that I cannot understand why Destiny was not made on something like Unreal. UDK is an absolutely ridiculously powerful engine that can easily make Destiny, and actually probably make Destiny look better than it does. The lighting engine there is so fucking powerful and so easy to use that college students make games that are almost the size of AAA horror games in fucking 5 weeks. If they were to just train their think people to work with UDK, it honestly, I really think it would do wonders for them. The blueprint system is just an absolutely phenomenal thing. And this is something that I don't quite get. With something like a blueprint system, which most game engines have, something like the scannables really shouldn't be that difficult to put into a games engine as a Cortex, or a Codex, either one. Because this is going to be a bit more on the technical side. Most of the time, an action, aka pressing something, activates something that relays to either other actions or a pause. So it stops something from happening, it starts something from happening, so stop, start, add, etc, etc. So what actually should have happened is there should have been a menu, either on the tower as a kiosk, or just on your character, that when you scan something, like a Ghost Cortex or Ghost Codex, you scan it, should have sent a signal to start the audio recording, and a second one to send off and unlock the same audio file to be able to be replayed at any time by clicking the X button. It's really not that difficult. What the actual thing is you don't tell it to do all of what I said. What you actually do is you put every single audio file in a folder, basically, called Codex. I say that. Then once you activate this one file name, it just unlocks the system of holding down X on it to play it. That system is then attached to an item in a menu. You then copy that system and just put it on a scannable. You then tell the system inside the file, until that one has been activated that's out in the world, do not activate or do not become touchable. There you go. It's fucking simple. But the way Bungie's system looks, and the way they explained how they build things, it looks like a lot of the early steps of making things is really complicated and broken, aka the way they described shaders. Of course, we have a problem right now with Vault Space and them saying that we can't have you mass delete shaders because of the way the maths works when it gives and divvies out Glimmer and other resources, which, if you don't understand, the reason that they're in separate stacks, if you buy them for Bright Dust, and if they're in separate stacks if you take them from a chest, etc, etc, is because they degrade into separate things, which makes complete sense. Now, the way I would go about this and go around this is I would have made a kiosk where you can buy them separately, or you can store them. So I could get 50 of, let's say, Earth's materials, and then 50 of a similar material, or the exact same one, for comparison's sake from Eververse. I could go up to this kiosk and store them like a vault space. It would take up its own pile. Any ones that's worth bright dust will be worth bright dust still. Any ones that's worth glimmer will be worth glimmer. Now, if I am to delete them, and I am somehow magically near the cap of bright dust, it would just do the simple thing and not let me do it till I spent some. And I know that might annoy some people, but that is a much better system than what they have going on right now. I actually think the same thing should exist for legendaries, as it did in Destiny 1, things like sparrows, ships, and even guns in some cases. You should have a kiosk where you can store things, and also it would show you what legendary guns you do and don't have, especially with the fact that the system that they have in place with no random rolls, it would be much simpler to do because there would be no way of having to overwrite any of the preordained system that's in the kiosk. Because what would be the difficult part of it and the more technical side of it is, let's say the kiosk was like a vault space, but it had a placement there already. The placement would say this gun has this perks on it. They would have to actually add all of the different random rolls that could drop on that gun, so that when you put it in, it didn't overwrite what your original gun is, because that would piss people off. But because this game has removed random rolls, it actually makes these kinds of systems and storing things and all of these systems so much more simple, because you can actually just put them in, and there's no way it can overwrite the perk system, because the gun you're putting in, all it has to do is say you have X number of that exact gun. That's it. Rather than X of this gun with this perk, it's just this gun is here. This gun is not here. You can't take it if it's not there, you can take it if it is there. It's very simple, moving numbers, and that to me really screams that their tools are the problem. And their tools need a huge fucking rework, or the company needs really, really to look at its managing staff and remanage it so that people can actually turn around and say, listen, we need to stop making games, or we need to start teaching people other fucking game engines because ours is too complicated, our blueprint system is just absolute trash, and we need other people to come in and make things for us, or we need to just rework all of our core systems, which yes, is difficult, I understand that, but it's so much better than losing your entire player base because you absolutely just release crap. Now, onto the Curse of Osiris itself. Just where the fuck do I start? You've probably noticed I'm losing my voice near the end of this, and I'm getting more and more sweary, because this is how this game makes me feel. Brother Vance, or Vance, being made into a fanboy was just fucking stupid. It was a fucking management team person who doesn't understand the Destiny universe at all coming in and saying, let's make it quirky, and that just doesn't work. The very fact that there was no new scannables, as I've covered, just makes no sense. Also, the player area was just so fucking small. It was so small, it didn't make any sense. The very fact you can't go into the Infinite Forest other than for adventures that give basically the same rewards as everything else in the game means that so much of the content was just literally dead day one content. Now, who the fuck named Lost Sectors? Show me them, I want to break their fingers. Because these things aren't lost, not only are they marked on maps, they have a big fucking neon sign out the front of them. It's like me saying that McDonald's is the quest for my lost quarter pounder. It just doesn't make any sense. Making the story about Osiris and Ikora was probably one of the biggest mistakes they ever made. I really think the Infinite Forest should have been Destiny 2's entire story. And I will get into why, but first off I've got to say, please give me Miranda back as my ghost. Honestly, I loved her so much. I love Sagira, and anything Firefly related makes me want to spew out of every body orifice. And I'm really not a fan of Northbot. It just doesn't ring true to me. I actually loved Dinklebot. I think he was great for it because his dry sort of attitude really, really made more sense to me. But hey. Masterworks was really the first time, or the Master Forge, I guess. This was actually before Masterworks was a thing, but the Forge was the first time the game threatened to become interesting and offer some form of grind. And my god, I can't tell you how fucking grindy those things were if you haven't played the game. But at the same time, if the guns were good, like the fucking pulse rifle, I loved the pulse rifle from there. It felt worth the grind. It was the first time I really felt like I was working towards something awesome. And unfortunately, Sagira's Ghost Shell as a reward, while feeling awesome, the very fact, it didn't give us her voice, I think that would have been cool. In some way, it shouldn't have been that hard to actually just basically re-record voice lines, but hey, that's just me. And also the fact that her shell doesn't actually animate like the real Sagira kind of annoyed me. I was a bit like, come on, you could have just used the pre-animations that are for Osiris's Ghost Shell anyway, because they're already in the game, but I'm guessing they're already made separately. As I said, I think their pipeline is shit, so I'm assuming they modelled that as a completely separate shell, and so the animations just couldn't work for it. Now, my god, I have wrote fucking essays on simulation theory. Simulation and simulacra are something I have just done so much fucking research on, and I can tell you it is one of the biggest missed opportunities in Destiny history, not just as the whole game, but just as a franchise. Using the Infinite Forest as a side DLC was a huge, huge fucking mistake. I cannot explain to you enough how interesting this stuff is. Now, I would like for Destiny to kind of nail down, is it simulation or is it time travel? Because it kind of doesn't make sense sometimes. If we're in a simulation, why is it affecting reality? But then they explain it as, oh, it's because we might be in a simulation, blah blah blah. It's just, I kind of wish it was very clear, cookie cutter, what the fuck they're actually doing. And from what my understanding of the Infinite Forest is it's a machine that is infinitely making thousands of millions upon billions of different universes, all with slight variations on history, so that they could see what would happen. Now, we can see that Osiris actually has some form of control over it. Now, let me tickle your mind here. Now, imagine if the Infinite Forest had been the entire game, rather than an infinitely generated pathway. Imagine if we had had a fucking story where Osiris never left the city. We go in to see what Osiris did if he never left the city. He becomes the speaker. He puts his research towards the Vault of Glass as top priority. Praedith never goes in there. Praedith goes to Osiris instead. Whatever. So many different things could happen. Then you find out that the Red Legion is on the way because you dealt with Vogue so much earlier. And you find out that the Dreadnought is causing havoc, blah blah blah. And instead what you do is you intercept the Red Legion. You try and make them go for a crash course into the fucking Dreadnought. So Oryx versus the Red Legion in this massive fucking space war. Then maybe Osiris, because he never left the city, because everything got sorted out really early and Siva and stuff never actually happened, he finds out about the Siva. He is the one that thinks, let's go have a look at this. And so we have to go into a different timeline where we look at the Iron Lords going through fucking battle after battle. We jump onto the front lines alongside fucking Saint 14. We fight up, Sivered up Iron Lords fighting for their consciousness, and just so many ideas that could be but won't be. And my god, just imagine a raid system based off the Infinite Forest. It could be so many different things. It's also a really good way of reusing assets that doesn't feel cheap. You could have the entirety of the Vault of Glass as part of a bigger raid. You could have the entirety of the Taken King as part of a different raid. You could do so many different fucking things. It's mental. But I digress. I feel like this might have been at some point the original idea. Now, the reason for that, if the Infinite Forest is what I think it is, and what they kind of say it is, it makes a lot more sense for this raid layer system to exist, because there is a gateway that opens up into a literal infinite amount of universes, with infinite possibilities of story. So, with Osiris being able to control it, it would have made sense that we could go in and do multiple raids, because that is kind of the point of it, to find different versions of reality and find out what would happen if such and such took place. So, at some point, I have a feeling that this is exactly what the raid was meant to be. It was meant to be the Infinite Forest, but as I said, that's just speculation. And to be honest, this is where I'm thinking of cutting this, because I feel like these things have all been covered by different people, and I've got so much I could say about the Curse of Osiris, but it really speaks for itself with the things I've already said. And the Infinite Forest, I could say so many things about the Iron Lords fucking fighting against Rasputin's frames while missiles are falling around you and you just tunnel through heroically amongst all these other awesome people battling, and just, so fucking cool. There's just so many cool things that could happen, and they just won't do it, and it disappoints me so much. But my voice is going, and I'm not feeling too well, so I think I'm probably going to have to cut this off here. But I'm going to put my final thoughts together, and then we'll end the video. I can already tell I'm going to hate how much editing this is going to take, but I feel I have to put, like, some form of final notes in here just to sort of state my opinion. And after all of this, putting everything into one place, I will admit I enjoyed playing Destiny 2 for the first time. Finding the Leviathan of Titan, seeing it swim past that giant fucking window, and seeing its little fins pop up, stuff like that, where we thought that would be the Leviathan raid, which I think would have been much cooler, but yeah. The streamlined loot system was still kind of enjoyable in short bursts, and for a short time it was fine. And the grind might have been removed, and the strikes might have been a bit shit, but I still enjoyed my fucking time with it. Overall, yes, it's a better fucking game than Destiny 1 vanilla, but it's actually not. It's kind of a bit of both worlds. It's too streamlined. Things like Xur really put into perspective if you look at the differences between the inventories. And yeah, it would be a crime as a gamer and as someone who wants to work in this industry and has such a passion for this industry to not want the games industry to get to this level of suck. I want Destiny to be a great game. I love the Destiny universe, and I really would love it if Luke Smith or Christopher Brett could see this, because, or just hear this, or hear me say this, because I have some fucking great memories with some great friends, and I have had amazing times playing the first Destiny and the second one. I have had some amazing experiences that I will never get doing anything else than gaming, and I cannot thank the games industry enough for the life they have given someone with my problems. And even though my problems stem from a lot of the fact that my life is kind of isolated, and I gamed before I had them, I now truly appreciate how much contact I've had over the last 10 years with the outside world, and how much love I've got from people who are half the world away. It really does impact me in such a special way. And I want to leave this off with a little story. Now, I don't know if my friends will remember this, but we have carried so many people through the raids. So many fucking people. And they're some of my greatest friends, whether they be people that we only raided with once, or people we raided with fucking hundreds of times, like Johnny, Flem, Neon, Cal, Wolf even. So many fucking people. Cal's sister. Just so many people. And one of the best memories I have was an autistic boy and his dad, who had never done the raid before. And we were doing Vogue, and he said, "It's alright, we'll just leave because we're holding you guys back." And we went, no, it's fine. Because we love that raid. We loved all of the raids. And they were just shocked, because how many raid teams fucking kicked them because his son couldn't play properly because he was autistic. And it was so hard. It was so fucking hard to get them through those raids. But we didn't just do Vogue, we did Crota, and we did King's Fall, because at the time the last raid wasn't out yet. And I'd never really felt like we did anything special even though it really was fucking like 7 hours of raiding, which would have been about 2 hours if we had just done it without them. But to hear that kid excited about getting raid loot and getting guns that he could never have gotten, to hear them excited about finishing the raid, and the father being happy for his son getting achievements and stuff, it just felt good. It felt so good, and I don't care whether people say, like, this sounds like the fakest shit ever. It's my memory, and it's something I'm going to treasure. And I'm going to treasure so many different memories from my time gaming on Destiny. We've been given such a great fucking experience in the first Destiny, and I'm hoping Destiny 2 does the same for me and many other people. And we gave people fun by carrying. And Destiny 2, in a way, I don't want to carry people through those raids. Like, I don't think I could have done it for that kid or his father in Destiny 2, because I just didn't enjoy doing those sections over and over and over again. They were miserable. And I don't know if it would even be possible to do it. And, yeah. As I said, I don't know whether... I don't care whether people believe me or not. Me and my friends know who we are, what we've done, and how we did it, and we're glad for what we are and what we've done and how we've did it. And it made it worth the fight, even if it was for repeated loot. It was just nice to hear people excited to see Atheon for the first time. No matter how many people I saw see it for the first time, it always felt good to get them there. To not only let them see Atheon for the first time, but let them fall. And let them fall over and over against this colossal task, which we've done countless times, but to them is their first fucking experience of trying to kill Atheon and then eventually succeeding. Getting Shadow White, getting just to the end. And like a raid, this video is fucking long, boring, and probably no one's ever gonna see or hear these words. But I thank you guys so much if you've taken the time to listen this far. This has taken unbelievable amounts of work, and it's exhausting. It really is exhausting for someone like me to do this kind of stuff, but this is what I kind of want to do from time to time, is put myself out there and work through these things, even though it's kind of painful. To share my experiences and my opinions to hopefully better the games industry in a way I can. If I can't work in it, I can at least somehow try and have an influence from the outside. I honestly appreciate it more than you know if you got this far, and a like would be highly appreciated for the amount of effort that got put into this. If you dislike it, that is fine. I would like to know why in the comments, and I would really like to have an open dialogue about this with anyone that wants to talk about it. And if you share it with people, don't forget to tell me that you shared it with people, because I appreciate that so fucking much. And as always, guys, peace out, and have a good one.